not go hunting on the moonless nights, nor at midsummer, nor on any night where you hear the brass bells of the lords and the ladies. They will laugh, and they will play, and they too will hunt. But should they find you, it is you who will run, and pant, and beg, and scream. The Shining Ones will take you away, and show you their terrific feats and their favourite games, and you will never be seen again by kith or kin, another soul lost to the chiming of the riding bells and the merry laughter of the elves. Welcome back to the Lore of Discworld. In this episode we will be exploring the lore of some of the most purely evil beings in the realms of Discworld, perhaps even more evil than the creatures of the dungeon dimensions, because unlike those creatures, the elves know exactly what they are doing, and they enjoy it. Now, for people familiar with elves as a concept, you might be thinking that I have it all wrong. Elves are noble, immortal beings, aloof, a bit snobbish, yes, a bit self-important, but ultimately good beings, yes? Well, I'm afraid that that's because, in a Discworld sense, you have been taken in by the glamour. The elves of Discworld are based on the nastier kind of fairy folk in European folklore, rather than the elves as portrayed in most modern fantasy fiction in the wake of the celebrated works of J.R.R. Tolkien or even Gary Gygax, such that if you were to think of the fair folk in such a way, that would be a surefire way to find yourself dead if you are lucky, or if you are very unlucky, living a very, very long time while wishing you were truly dead. Indeed, to quote the book that mostly details the elves, lords and ladies, talking about the elves is enormously dangerous in that it brings them forth, alerts them to your presence in the world, and so through the ages people have coined terms that are somewhat protective, respectful sounding, such as the lords and ladies, the gentry, the fair folk, the shining ones. People are even afraid to think about the elves being bad, because the elves will know. As elves ceased visiting our world because the barriers became too strong, people were afraid to think about the elves even so. They were afraid that they might one day return, and they would not talk about how bad they were, even when free from them. And as time went on, people only remembered that elves were beautiful. This is entirely down to the aforementioned glamour. When an elf is conscious, he or she is capable of making humans perceive them as beautiful and grand, taking on whatever appearance or attire they so desire for themselves, and that humans will feel by comparison worthless and unimportant. All this grandeur and ego is certainly hiding something, however, as their true appearance is a thin, fragile, grey-skinned creature, completely featureless and quite pitiful to behold. Their ability to cause glamour is the only strength in a race of unimaginative, sociopathic, spiteful, long-lived creatures with the minds of children. They hate the rest of creation for being everything they cannot be, and this has warped into a deep-seated superiority complex because of their ability to control those who are, in every other particular, more alive than they will ever be. They are wonderful, in that they inspire wonder. Fantastic, they weave fantasies. Marvellous, they create marvels, and they are terrific, in that they beget terror. The truth of the elves lies behind words that have changed their meanings, that have been warped by human fear. The truth of the elves is inhuman evil made all the worse by the total lack of empathy. Even beyond what you'd experience as a sociopath and a human, elves take it to the extreme by not even seeing anything that is not even their own species as a toy, a pet, a lower being, simply something that exists in the universe for them to exploit. And frankly, as an aside, many elves even feel that way about other elves, viewing the deaths of their theoretical comrades as highly amusing, with the sight of another elf receiving a crossbow bolt to the eye being observed by the other elves in the room as humour on the level with had he been hit by a custard pie. Elves ride on large, fiery-tempered horses which can only be tamed by iron, as witches can ride on a broomstick, so an elf can ride on a yarrow stalk. One of the elves' favourite weapons is the bow and arrow. which perhaps is one thing that Tolkien got right. The copper arrow, however, that is tipped with what we refer to as elf shot, a small arrowhead of stone from their own dimension that renders the prey unconscious, dreaming of playing with the fairies. Anyone who wakes from an elf-shot coma will be entirely enthralled to the will of the elves. This doesn't make you safe from them, however, since they will cheerfully turn on you and make you into their next plaything once they're done getting you to do whatever they wanted while you were under their thrall. In fitting with their understanding of power-based hierarchy, the elves are a feudal monarchy of a sort, based entirely on the strongest, oldest and most powerful elves being in charge. Fortunately for all concerned, none of this is generally tied to being the most intelligent elf, but with age and experience does come a kind of low cunning which should not be underestimated. The current king and queen of the elves are undergoing a marital spat of the sort that divides a household, but has devolved over millennia into a petty grudge where the whole marriage thing is still technically there, but both parties live as far apart as elvenly possible and refuse to speak to or about one another outside the times it is utterly necessary. Below them are the various elven lords and sycophants of various levels of cunning and skill, with the hierarchy after this point getting a little confused as we never see any real details into elven culture after this point, since they have no detrimental effects from aging as far as we can see on the human timescale. Their system and leadership seems to be one that operates exclusively on the principle of dead elves' shoes. They have no artistic talents, but they do want to have some fun, so they kidnap human musicians and bards, even children, who are expected to sing, dance and play for their amusement. The elves have no sense of pain, contributing highly to their empathy, sympathy and conscience being entirely absent, at least as far as anyone can even tell or would want to tell. Elves lie and make empty promises because they want to get at people and they want to hurt them more. The pain of realizing you've been lied to is just another form of amusement to them. And to the elves, music is fun, but torture is even more fun. And the snapping of bones and the screaming that it causes is just another kind of music, really. Indeed, Pratchett also compares the elves to cats, both being extremely stylish to the point where humans are endeared to them and entirely willing to overlook that they are excessively cruel, murderous bastards. But there is one thing that the elves cannot stand, cannot have near them in any circumstances, that being iron. You see, while it has become an item of folklore that the fair folk cannot be close to iron, it actually has its roots in biology of all places, like pigeons, mole rats, bats and chickens, all of which they would be deeply insulted to compare to, which to my mind only makes it a funnier comparison. Elves have a natural magnetoreception sense that allows them to navigate by the natural magnetic field of a planet or similar body in order to perceive direction, altitude and location. To the elves, however, they have come to rely on it utterly, and it's become tied to their egos, suiting their worldview of elven superiority that no matter where they are in the universe, elves are the creatures who know exactly where they are. When iron is brought into proximity, this destroys and disrupts the magneto-sense. It warps their perceptions to the point of trauma, causing them vast psychosomatic pain and even death. Their glamour seems to tie directly into their magnetoreception as well, as wearing iron on the body renders you immune to some of the more soporific manipulations and influence, rendering their idiosyncratic singing as scratchy and without its usual effects. A small but wonderful detail included by Pratchett to my mind, particularly as someone who has studied a lot of biology, is that elven blood is not red, due to the fact that the red in blood comes from the iron oxide content in the hemoglobin. As such, the elves with their utter aversion to iron would not have this, and indeed their blood is described as being bluish-green in colour, which is the colour that you would get from oxidised copper, suggesting that their hemoglobin draws from a different source entirely. This is an excellent little detail. The thing that makes the elves so unique among the Discworld species, however, is that they are not native to it. Indeed, they are the closest things to literal aliens we've seen in the novels, with the aforementioned exception of the Lovecraftian horrors of the dungeon dimensions. The elvish species is the dominant species in one or more parasitic universes. A parasitic universe is like a parallel universe, but more nasty. These are not true universes in their own right, but in a way pocket dimensions, small worlds outside the normal skein of time and space, that can latch onto other universes where they find weaknesses in the barriers and travel through to the other side. Because in the case of the elves, They do this to steal things and to amuse themselves, to find something, whether there are other parallel universes with other denizens that are more benign or equally strange. It's possible, but we don't know about them. More than once, the elves have attempted to leave their subpar universe altogether and occupy ones such as Discworld or our own round world. This is on a meta-reality scale treated roughly equivalent as the infection of parasitic organisms in a crop of fruit grain, and for exactly the same reason. A long-term elf infestation can rob a world of all its life and colour and beauty and art, as the elves approach such concepts as capitalistic strip miners, plundering everything of worth from a world and leaving the residents with nothing but fear and nightmares before moving on to the next one once they run out of things to amuse themselves where they are. As to the primary parasite universe of the elves, known by the rather derogatory title of Fairyland, which I suspect is mostly to annoy the more proud elves living there, it seems to be made of at least 3 distinct domains. The principal part of Fairyland, and the one featured in Lords and Ladies, is the land of Everwinter, under its permanent aurora and moonlit sky, where the castle of the Queen of the Elves is located amid mountain ranges. Once, when the King and Queen ruled together, this area of Fairyland was a different place. It was said that the Queen was always happy then, and it wasn't nearly so cold. There were flowers and birds in summertime, but this version of Fairyland was destroyed in the argument that I mentioned between the King and the Queen. As I said, it was quite a spat that did involve some level of magic. The portal to the land of Everwinter is located in the Dancers of Lancre, a set of standing stones made of magnetic red meteoric iron, which holds back the elves from crossing, at least unless the barriers get too weak. The second is the King's Domain, which appears as a long sweat house of animal hides and steam, with a king with his antlered head and great stag-like hind legs waits for the end of the age of technology and iron and learning, more patient than his aggressive and spiteful wife. With him are those elves that followed him and follow his philosophy of patience to outlast the age of iron. The portal to the King's Domain is hidden within the Long Man, the uniquely shaped earthworks located as well in Lancre. Unlike the Dancers, the portal here is horizontal, meaning that only 3 of the magnetic stones are needed, thus arranged into an archway. The third we know of is the aspect most suited to the name of Fairyland, which, in short, could be seen as the Queen's ideal for what her domain should be, or possibly what it was, rather than what it has become, away from the main seats of elven power, full of species that have migrated or been abducted into the elves' service. The wider aspect of Fairyland is much more complex and unique with its nature, flora and fauna, and so it probably needs a video unto itself, which I will do in this series. But for now, I think it's safe to say that this is a lot of where the Queen keeps her pets and her servants and those she likes to send into the worlds to find her some subjects when a full-scale elven invasion is not on the cards. And for now, I think we've covered most of the important principal aspects of the dominant species of the parasite universe of Fairyland, the elves. Hopefully this has educated you enough to avoid them at all costs, as that is generally the safest way to interact with them. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I have been Albion, and goodbye for now.